If you own property, it's your privilege as an owner to take on management responsibility of that property. Now, we happen to have two parcels of land, one with the house, which is 40 acres. That's actually across the street from the parcel I'm walking on right now, which is 14 acres. Now, we have a lot of land to manage, but you can manage a lot as small as a quarter acre, and you can decide how you want to use that property and what you want to get from that property, or how to maximize kind of your productive return from your land. And so one thing that I'm doing now is sorting out what to do with this particular parcel and look at how to make it more productive. Now, the parcel I'm walking on is actually very, very steep. So if you look up the hill there, the road is up at the top. Very, very steep land. And down here at the bottom, we have this large swamp or wet area. And in fact, this property extends about midway out into that swamp. And believe it or not, there's a stone wall buried out there underneath that water. The beavers dammed this up, flooded the meadow and swamp. This, where I'm walking, was all pasture at one time, and definitely was 100 years ago. And so what happened since then was this was planted with red pine. Let's take a look at it. So sometime in the 1950s, this entire hillside was planted with red pine trees, all in rows. The problem that we're experiencing now is, if I look up, you see many of these are all dead up at the top. We have red pine scale that's come through here, and so these trees are all dying and actually falling pretty rapidly. It's kind of like the emerald ash borer for the white ash. The red pine scale is just taking out these red pine trees. Now, the issue is there is no species diversity here except for a few white pines that are starting, and there's really no understory. So this is not ideal as a woodland. So since we've lived here, I've been considering what to do with this lot, this steep slope where all these red pine are dying and gonna come down. Now, we did use a bunch of the red pine up in the barn. I've made a bunch of videos working on the barns. So all the flooring, the sills, all of that is red pine. That came out of here. So that's great. The live trees are useful for that. But what do we do with this land now? And so what I'm starting to do is try to encourage a more diverse set of woodland species to grow, so that this will foster wildlife habitat. It can become sustainable firewood supply, and it can ultimately become timber supply as well on rotation, right? Small plot, 14 acres. We really only have about 8 or so that are useful forest here, but that's what we're looking at. So I've started out here, and I made a video on this too. I planted some black walnut seedlings out here in the bare areas, but I need to get some other species going as well. And so what I'm looking at is expanding and filling in out here with some sugar maple up that hillside. So right behind the garage, where we took out a bunch of the red pine to do the barn work, was sugar maple. And sugar maple is taking over because we have a couple of really, really big sugar maple trees in front of the house that have been doing very well for a long time, and actually now they're near the end of their life cycle. And so those trees drop a substantial number of seeds. And this year, when they dropped seeds, the kids and I went and we actually collected a whole bunch of sugar maple seeds from those trees. Now, what's good about that is those trees are well adapted to this area, and because those seeds are, wild from that tree, they should produce new trees that are well adapted to the area and should grow fairly well. So the plan is actually to take some of those seeds and start them up by the house in a garden bed. And the reason I'm going to do that is because if I just sow them directly out here, the deer are actually going to come and just eat those seedlings off as they germinate as soon as they're big enough. So I need to give them a good head start before I actually move them into the woods so that we reduce the number of losses that we take. So that is the plan. Take what is ultimately very, very uniform and add biodiversity and hopefully get a mix of species going in here so that we'll have some hardwoods growing along with these white pines. Sugar maple's great as a species because A, you can use the sap and make syrup. B, it's a very dense high BTU wood for firewood. And C, it's actually valuable for lumber as well. So if we can get them growing nice and straight and healthy down here, it would just be a much better usage of this land than all these dying red pines, which have ultimately come to naught. Now you may be thinking, yeah, but you can plant all the trees you want. You're never going to see the benefit from them. And that's true. In 40 years, a sugar maple may be 8-10 inches in diameter with good growing conditions. So at that point, all it is firewood, thinning them. The problem is in 40 years, I'll be almost 80 years old. So will I be really doing that? Possibly not. You don't necessarily plant the trees for you. You're managing it for the next generation and the generation after that. And so ideally, you create something sustainable and it can continue on into the future. And you can probably tell that it is fall. It's actually late fall at this point. We're into the beginning of November. And you may be wondering, why am I going to try and plant seeds for trees in the fall? Well, if I can get these seeds in the soil in the fall, they'll actually get to winter over. And so a lot of these trees and a lot of seeds in general need that cold period, that cold winter period where the conditions are right so that they can then germinate in the spring. So I'm hoping that if I can get these seeds set in some rows in a garden bed, that they'll sit there all winter and be ready to germinate in the spring. We've had the seeds jarred up inside, all dried out, so I think they're ready to go. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do today. The kids will be really excited about it, planting some seeds in the ground. They love planting stuff, and quite frankly, they dig in my garden too much, and so if I give them a reason to actually do some digging and productive planting, it'll keep them happy, and I won't be upset because they won't be ruining anything. So let's go do that.
Why would you say something? You can.
Put a couple of turns
Dad,
around
how are
that
you gonna
stake.
plant the trees?
What do you mean by the flower row?
You're getting some on the wood chips.
It's okay. All right, do you guys want to put some of these seeds in? We'll put them every few inches.
The good thing
We
is
have
I
no
still-
shortage of seeds, right? We can spread them out. Who's going to help me?
I am.
Who's going to help me put the seeds in the rows? Okay.
You need to put them a little bit far.
We have so many. Let's put them close and we'll see what grows. And then we can thin them out. If there's too many, we'll thin them out. That'll be all right.
Dad, no, I'm looking on the side of
just gotta kind of space them out. I mean, we're putting in very heavy, way more than we're gonna need in the end. But hopefully that'll make sure that we actually get a row full of little trees. Yes, I just sacrificed 2 rows of my vegetable garden for sugar maple seedlings. I'm not too worried about that or upset about that because, for one, I'm not sure how these are going to germinate, even though I hope they do. And for another, we've been growing squash and the squash bug pressure was very heavy last summer, and I'm thinking of just not growing squash at all in the upcoming season to let that population die back a little bit. Or if I do grow it, I'm going to grow it far away from here. So I should have the space. Anyway, we'll see if these grow.